Good morning. This is the HTCC Information Session for the 2024 round. We will have time for questions, and we have someone monitoring the chat, so we hope to be able to get to everybody if you have any questions. Before we get started, I just wanted to quickly show folks some resources on our website, and this is also where you can access copies of the slides that we're going to be going over today. So for those of you who may or may not know, chfa.org, to get to the HTCC webpage, you go to Developers and then Tax Credit Programs. And then within there, you would select the HTCC program. You can also see it on the side ribbon here. But this is a pretty important web page if you're going to be using this program. We do put our updated guidelines here. Here's the link to the quarterly report portal. If you look under general information and forms, so right here at the top, this is the PDF for today's presentation. So if you want to follow along or have a copy or reference after, this is where you can access that. We also post the HTCC round guidelines here as well. So that's something that will be a resource for you. And we have all of our reporting forms on here as well. So just making sure that folks know how to access that. And then the other item on our webpage that I wanted to draw your attention to is our consolidated application, which you can access here on the side here, Consolidated Application. So when you set up a SharePoint site, we'll go into detail of this through the training, but I just wanted to make sure folks know where to look on our website. When you have a SharePoint site set up to submit your application, all these documents will be in the SharePoint site as well. But I know I use this webpage quite a bit for a resource, especially as you're starting to prepare your application. And if you don't have a SharePoint site, you can go ahead and look at the consolidated application. You can take a look at any of the updates that we discussed today. And then here are the corresponding forms. So again, just resource for you guys of how to access. All right, and we will get started. I did want to just let everybody know who's with us here today from CHFA. You'll be hearing from several of us today. I've got Deb Alter, who is our Senior Program Officer for Program and Administration. I also have Seema Malani, who is a Senior Program Officer for our reporting section. She's going to be going through the SharePoint site and the consolidated application. Jennifer Landau, who is our Senior Program Officer for our Tech Services Division. She's also joined by her colleague, Leslie Malaga. We have Stephen Norris and Trayvon Perry, who are HTCC staff as well. So that's your HTCC team for today. All right, we'll get started. So again, this is the information session for folks who are wanting to apply for the 2024 HTCC round. Today, we will cover program objectives. We'll go through some updates and cover some reminders for 2024. We will discuss the application process and timeline. We'll be sure to discuss how you sign up for a SharePoint site, which is how you'll submit your application. We'll do a real brief, high-level run through the consolidated application. We'll discuss some highlights for maintaining compliance for HTCC, provide some project closeout reminders, and we'll have time for question and answers. So CHFA administers the HTCC program, which was established by statute to assist nonprofit entities creating affordable housing. So the eligible uses for HTCC include affordable housing developments. So that would be in a general class or a set aside for workforce housing or supportive housing. There is a new definition of workforce housing development called Workforce Housing Development Project. This is new in statute. It's pretty specific in the breakout that's required. So it would be 10% affordable, 50% workforce housing, and 40% market rate. So I would really encourage, if you feel like you have a project that fits within that definition, to spend some time reviewing the statute, which is referenced here on this slide. We also fund revolving loan funds, so for a general revolving loan fund program, as well as a workforce housing revolving loan fund program. So to be eligible to apply, the applicant must have as one of its purposes the construction, rehabilitation, ownership or operation of housing. You need to be a nonprofit corporation or CDFI. That agency needs to be established for a minimum period of 3 years. And we would look at an exception if it was a nonprofit agency formed by a housing authority. You need to be in compliance with the requirements of the HTCC program and any prior awards. And you need to be in compliance with any applicable CHFA board and policy statements. And you have to demonstrate the administrative capability to undertake the proposed project in a timely fashion. The eligible uses of the program funds, again, affordable housing development. So this is the rehab, new construction of rental or homeownership housing. You can also apply to capitalize a revolving loan fund to provide low-cost loans for new construction, rehab, or acquisition of affordable housing. So the units must benefit eligible, extremely low, very low, low and moderate income households. So we have 10 million available annually of tax credits. 1 million is set aside for eligible workforce housing. 2 million is set aside for permanent supportive housing. So no one applicant can receive more than 500,000 per year, and you can't receive more than 1.5 over 3 consecutive years for the same property. So full applications that are received prior to the deadline will be reviewed, rated, and ranked based on the following criteria. So we will look at project feasibility and readiness to proceed, affordability, applicant capacity and goals, livability initiatives, and compliance. We also will work with our technical services staff, and they will review certain components of your application, including the qualified development team, including the contractor and the architect. They'll review the development scope. They'll review the flood zone, historic preservation compliance, if that's available at time of application, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The development budget, they'll review the hard costs, the environmental site assessments, and the hazardous materials surveys, as well as the building permits, if that's available at the time of application. Okay, so the next section, we're going to highlight any changes that we made for 2024 and just provide some reminders. So with regards to the CONAP updates, so each year we do take a look at the application and make improvements. So there's a few items that have been removed from the CONAP for this year. And just to stress that removal from the application does not mean that those items might not be applicable. It just might not be something that CHFA needs to review. Maybe you trigger it from a different funding source. So it's really the applicant's responsibility to make sure that you're meeting any requirements, regardless of whether or not we review it.
So as Colette mentioned, these are some of the items that have been removed from the HTCC application. And when the tech slides come up, I'll go through this in a tiny bit more detail, but the planning and zoning approval has now been removed, as has the exploded trade payment breakdown and the project cost summary, because those two basically go hand in hand. The Davis-Bacon state prevailing wage Department of Labor determination letter, that's exhibit 4.9D. That's also been removed from the application, as has exhibit 10.8 housing consultant certification.
The exhibit 12.12, we did change this. This was the HTCC justification form. So it is now the HTCC gap financing form. The big change here is that it no longer requires approval or signature from DOH and CHFA. We did make some changes to the gap financing guidelines, so we're going to go through that. But just with regards to changes to the CONAP, at this point, it's just noting that this form has changed and it won't require a signature before submission. And then back to you, Jennifer, on these tech items.
So one of the changes is the SHPO. So in discussions with SHPO, they would prefer to review projects that have been actually awarded funding. So applicants will be required to contact the SHPO office once the HTCC award has been announced. If you already do have that SHPO outreach and that determination letter, certainly provide that with your HTCC application. And again, you will need to certify that SHPO requirements, if any, will be addressed as part of the scope of work. So this is a little bit of a change again from last year. Another change regarding the environmental concerns and certification exhibit 12.6. This has been changed to environmental certification. So in this exhibit, you'll need to summarize at a very high level, the environmental concerns noted, describe your existing conditions and any and all actions that will need to be performed to satisfy those environmental requirements. And then we're asking that you certify that all of those concerns will be addressed as part of your scope of work. And this is something you can work with your LEP to determine, what those concerns are and how you need to address them, given the laws and regulations. And I think this now is turned over to Leslie.
Yes, hi. So for this item 3.1A is in regards to the development team, for which the architect and the GC are required to provide a license with the state of Connecticut, and you will need to submit evidence for each item. For exceptions due to the scope, we note that if a licensed architect is not required by the town of the city or the city building department, given your proposed scope of work, that may not be required for the HTCC. And a similar item, also the GC, a major GC license may also not be required. Therefore, we would be able to accept the state of Connecticut home improvement contractor license. However, for each one of these items where a license may not be required, you will need to provide evidence with each application. One exception is with CT building code for 1 and 2 family dwellings, where it does not require the services of a licensed architect. CHFA will allow the work to be performed by a contractor. Again, this will have to be a home improvement contractor license with an active and current license for each jurisdiction. And I think that's it.
So it's back to me. So this is Jennifer. So just as a reminder for your phase 1 or phase 2, these are required for projects when the scope of work includes either new construction, if you're doing an addition or a bump out to an existing building, or if you're planning as part of your scope of work any new site work or any site work that's going to require excavation or work that's disturbing the soil. So those are instances where we would require the phase 1. And keep in mind that if the phase 1, when it's completed, if it does note any concerns or possible future or additional investigations, that would be considered a phase 2. And that would also be required as part of the application. We would want to see that any concerns noted in the phase 1 have also been investigated further through the phase 2. And this does include single family developments. So again, we wanted to note that there may be times when an exception is warranted. So this would be if you're constructing on raw land without any hazardous materials, or if you have an older phase 1 report for the site and you have retained ownership and can attest that the site does not contain any underground storage tanks for fuel or any other potential contaminants, or if you can, again, certify that the site has not been used for any illegal dumping or other prior uses which may lead to soil or water contamination. So those are the exemptions for that phase 1, phase 2 requirement. And again, just another reminder, the phase 1 is not required if you're only doing an in-place renovation or rehabilitation and you're not considering any site work, you're not doing any work outside of the building envelope, such as utility work, sidewalks, or parking. But again, remember that a hazardous materials survey is required for all existing buildings that are to be renovated, whether it's minor, moderate, or substantial, or if they're even going to be demolished as part of your scope of work. So keep in mind that given the age of the building, if it's a building, older than 1980, asbestos, lead-based paint, lead in soil, lead in water, PCBs, those are all items that could potentially be present. So we would need testing for all of those possible hazardous materials. And radon and mold are also required. And those are required for even newer buildings. If you have a building built in the 1990s, although the other hazardous materials may not be present, we would still need to see that radon and a visual mold survey has been done at the site. So just kind of keep those in mind. So again, just a little bit of a recap. For the tech items, the flood zone, that information is still required. Planning and zoning approvals are not required any longer. Site plan approval is also not required. The project cost summary and exploded trade payment breakdown, those are also not required this year. The Connecticut Department of Labor state prevailing wage determination letter is not required. And the historic significance, that item has been removed in place of item 4.4 related to SHPO.
Yeah, the one thing that I would just add on the SHPO, so again, they are not wanting to review all the applications unless they have funding. So it is something that you will have to do probably with reservation. So if you have other funding sources that you've already obtained that historic review, you can go ahead and include it with your application, and just know that if you get an award, we're looking for you to reach out to SHPO. And then we can pause here if there's any questions on the technical services piece while we have Jennifer and Leslie.
Yeah, and Jennifer, Leslie and I are also available. You know, if you have specific questions on your project, you know, certainly feel free to reach out to either of us, and we're happy to discuss any questions you might have, unless there's any questions right now. Hi, Helen.
Hi, everyone. I have a question for you, Jennifer. I'm sure it'll be evident once we open the Con app, but how are we going to document the cost of the project if there's no exploded trade payment breakdown and project cost summary?
Other than the development budget?
So typically,
yeah, I don't know. It has the Con app might have been, I'm not sure of the changes to the Con app, but I mean,
Okay.
Typically the exploded trade flows into the project cost summary, flows into the development budget. So perhaps they've just been removed from the Con app. Seema, can you speak to that in terms of just the functionality of the Con app?
No, none of that has been updated. And you're right, that's the flow in the Con app. It's exploded trade feeds into the PCS feeds into the, so we'll have to look at it.
So it sounds like they'll still have to fill it out. It just won't be something that tech will be reviewing, commenting on.
Yeah.
Good question, Helen. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll put out a Q&A on that, Helen, but I think that was our intention, is that because we have so many varied applications and they can break out the costs differently, we found it really difficult to review. So again, we'll put out a Q&A, but the intention is that we would do less of a cost review on those two items, but it sounds like you'll still need to complete that so that you can get the development budget.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
We can
Thank you
always
for
put it
bringing
into
that
the
up.
budget, Seema. Seema, we can always put it into the budget directly if you allow us.
Okay, we'll look at it. Thank you for bringing that up. Anything else before we move on? Okay, and like Jennifer said, you know, we're here for follow-up questions if you want to email us or contact us after the session. Okay, so wanted to go through the HTCC guidelines and provide you with an overview of the changes, and then just provide you with some reminders. Again, you can find the guidelines on that HTCC webpage that I showed you at the beginning on our website. So one of the bigger changes this year is refining the language around gap financing requests. So projects that already have CHFA or DOH commitment in place are eligible to apply for HTCC, but those costs need to be unavoidable or unforeseeable. You need to demonstrate that your contingency balance cannot absorb and for developer fee is maxed out. HTCC cannot be used as a substitute for developer cash equity or deferred developer fee, and betterments to the project are generally not considered gap funding, not considered funding gaps. So this includes items that were previously removed through a value engineering exercise. So again, we mentioned changes to Exhibit 12.12, which is that HTCC gap financing justification form. Again, just a reminder, you don't need to go get signature for that in advance of your submission. Applications seeking gap financing that already have the DOH CHFA commitments, particularly if these commitments were awarded originally with balance sources and uses, you can anticipate a higher level of scrutiny. So applicants applying for gap financing are still strongly encouraged to notify their CHFA underwriter in advance of the application submission. So when we're evaluating these applications, we will be consulting with CHFA underwriting, technical services staff, and leadership when we're determining the need and eligibility. CHFA may rely on project information and circumstances known that relate to existing CHFA and DOH commitments. And the final determination for eligibility is at our sole discretion. The other section that I would draw your attention to in the guideline is just some updates to the evidence of firm financial commitments. So for energy rebates, firm financial commitment is considered a counterside application. That's the terminology used by the utility companies, or a letter of agreement if it's a rehab. For deferred developer fee, we'll consider that a firm financial commitment if it's supported by a fully executed partnership or operating agreement. With regards to reserves that are in the sources and sources of funds, we'll be looking for third-party evidence if a third party holds and needs to authorize the release of that reserve, showing that it's been approved and it's eligible to be used for the project. So this would also include CHFA held reserves. And if the applicant holds the reserves, then we're looking for the board resolution to authorize that it's being used for this project. And with regards to a 9% LIHTC deal, a reservation letter is what's considered a commitment. For 4% LIHTCs, we'll need that firm commitment of a TEB to recognize those sources. And I would just encourage folks, when you're preparing your application, to pull up that section of the guideline that goes through the evidence of firm financial commitments, and just make sure you're submitting the proper documentation, because those are an area that we award points for. So just make sure that you're providing the information that we need to be able to look at that for points. For permanent supportive housing, if you're applying under that set aside, we're looking to see that the applicant itself is the qualified service provider, and they're listed and defined in the most current supportive housing guideline. With regard to revolving loan funds, we didn't make any changes on this end. These are just some reminders from last year. So we now have Exhibit 14.7, which is evidence of leveraged funds. So only funds that are available or accessible to the applicant will be considered leveraged funds. So we're looking for you to provide evidence that those funds are available to be loaned, and we are looking to see what the recent balance within 90 days of the application are. Again, for revolving loan funds, we're looking for a detailed description of the program and copies of the documents and templates to be used in the administration of the fund. And the nonprofit needs to certify that uncommitted balances of previous HTCC funds do not exceed $750,000. So that's Exhibit 12.5 in the application. Committed funds do not count towards the $750,000 limitation. Some reminders with regards to workforce housing set-asides. If units cannot be sold or rented to qualified households, the funds need to be returned. So this is a statutory set-aside, so there's no waivers or adjustments. So just keep that in mind if you're planning to apply under that set-aside, that you need to meet that criteria. So just a reminder on that piece, because that's not something that we can provide any sort of adjustment to. And if you're coming in for workforce housing and you're looking to get points for low-income housing service period, so like an affordability period, you'll need to provide a copy of that proposed deed with your application for us to review. And just some reminders for revolving loan fund compliance. So the funds are expected to be exhausted prior to the 3-year time frame. And the fund is supposed to stay open for the minimum 3-year period. You need to provide quarterlies throughout that 3-year period, and any funds that come back during that need to go into the segregated account. In the guidelines, we also kind of outline what we see as the critical compliance components. So again, the guideline should be a tool if you're new to HTCC, or if you have new staff, or if you're just trying to refamiliarize yourself. This section of the guideline in particular will kind of help you understand how to maintain compliance. So again, you need to obtain any necessary project approvals. zoning changes, municipal approvals, and permits. A big thing for the HTCC compliance is maintaining the segregated bank account and the accurate accounting records. So again, the HTCC ward will need to be in its own bank account, and that's what you'll be providing documentation for with each quarterly report. So we look very closely at how the funds are being managed in that account. You need to make good faith efforts to market the housing program. And you need to meet the required timeframes. So it needs to be completed within 3 years from the date of approval. Submit timely and accurate and complete quarterly and closeout reports. And another big one is to make sure that you reach out to us if for some reason you need to change or modify your program. So our new report forms kind of incorporate that into the quarterly reports, but please just reach out to us if you foresee needing to make a change in the project, so that we can have that conversation before the changes, before you just make the changes. We need to be able to review those and approve them. And then finally, participation in CHFA monitoring activities, which are primarily site visits, and occasionally we'll ask for additional information, and to just avoid penalties and non-compliant designations. All right, so now moving on to the rating and ranking changes. So again, these will be in the CONAP and the points worksheets.
Paulette, there's a question.
Oh, okay.
Paulette, for permanent supportive housing, it now says that the applicant needs to be the qualified service provider. Many times the service provider is not a developer, but there'll be a nonprofit developer, then we'll bring in a service provider. This seems to not allow that.
For the set aside, that's correct. So you would still be able to apply for points for the supportive housing, but for the set aside, you have to meet this criteria.
Would this be met if they were a co-applicant?
I think so, but we can put that in a Q&A. I'd like to just think it through. But I mean, if they're a co-applicant, we can look at that. I'd have to kind of understand the relationship. So maybe it's something that we can think about and just put in a Q&A. All right, so moving back to the rating and ranking changes. So this program really aims to support smaller projects with fewer units and fewer public resources. So the changes in the 2024 scoring reflect this ongoing priority. So again, we're focused on these next few slides are specifically for the housing development points worksheets. So that includes both the housing development and the housing development workforce points. So the first change here is that we no longer are providing points for balance sources and uses. So that's been removed from the application. We still will provide points for firm commitments, and that's 1A in the rating and ranking, but you no longer get any additional points if it's full balance sources and uses. Item 1C, which is now bumped up to 1B, is the percent of the project funded by HTCC. So the change here is that we're no longer providing points for projects that have less than 10% of their project funded by HTCC. Otherwise, the ranges remain the same, and we'll provide up to 8 points. For supportive housing points, you'll need to have an MOU or service plan in place that must be approved by DEMIS. And we're only awarding points if you're targeting homeless or chronically homeless populations. Item 3B, which is number of years of relevant experience, that has been removed. We have a new point category, which is nonprofit applicant involvement. So you'll get 5 points if you meet any of the following criteria. So for a LIHTC project, if the nonprofit is a sole member of the general partner or the managing member, that would qualify for the points. If this is a housing authority sponsored project and the housing authority and the nonprofit have a share in the partnership, this would be acceptable. Nonprofit is the property manager of the housing development. The developer is the nonprofit or a sole member of a development entity. And the nonprofit is the full or sole member of the ownership entity. For item 4D, the SSHP points, we reduced those points from 7 down to 5. And we have a new point category, which is the number of total units in the development. So we'll award up to 5 points for smaller projects with 20 units or less. And then for the revolving loan funds, we did not make any changes to those points worksheets for this year. And then for, I'm going to introduce Trayvon Perry. He's going to do the next few slides.
I'll let Dave has a question again.
Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Yes. The applicant, I believe, needs to be a nonprofit to even apply. How would an applicant not get the points for the nonprofit category you added?
So we've had like LIHTC projects in particular that may have a smaller nonprofit, a smaller percentage of the managing member. So we're looking to see them have the sole membership.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else before we turn it over to Trayvon? Okay. Trayvon?
Hello. So the 2024 quarterly and closeout reports. So reports have been revised and are posted on the CHAPA website. We have a screenshot to the right. It shows all of the different guidelines, progress reports, presentations, certificate of project completion, and certificate and for the revolving loan fund as well. 2024 awards are required to use the new forms. CHAPA procedures. So the program procedures for HTCC are unchanged from the last revision of early 2015. And HTCC program procedures may be found in Section 4, Tax Credit Programs of the CHAPA procedures located on the CHAPA website. Income limit updates. HTCC rental housing programs and revolving loan fund utilize HUD Section 8 income limits. HTCC home ownership housing program and revolving loan fund utilize the CHAPA single family income and sales limits. When you go in the presentation, if you click on those, though, that's a link to, and it'll bring you straight to there. And then income and sales price limits may be adjusted annually. Applicable policies. CHAPA board policy statements apply to the HTCC program and include program eligibility requirements, delinquent or non-performing applicants policy statement, multifamily rental housing development costs policy statement. Those are links as well, and any other policies as may be applicable. Application process and funding timeline. So the process and timeline. So applicants must use the 2024 version of the Consolidated Application, which is on the website. Completed applications must be submitted through SharePoint no later than June 5th, 2024 by 4 p.m. Deficiency letters will not be sent, and applications missing T or threshold items from the exhibit checklist will not be given further consideration. So you should make sure, before you submit, make sure all the threshold items are submitted, because you won't have another chance to submit after June 5th at 4 p.m. Applications are scored against the program criteria. Top scoring housing programs will be recommended for reservations until the pool of $10 million is exhausted. Announcements are made in September, and approved applicants will have 60 days to provide executed business firm commitments. The business firm makes the HTCC payment or contribution to the award recipient for its housing program. The award recipient provides evidence in the form of a notarized statement with a copy of the check and evidence that the funds are in a segregated account. And CHAPA issues a tax credit voucher to the business firm. Any uncommitted funds become available to the next highest ranked applicants who are able to secure business firm commitments. And business firm commitments for these uncommitted funds will be due 30 days from notification of funds availability. And here's just a calendar of pretty much, all I just said. So May, SharePoint site requests must be received by May 31st, 2024. June, applications are due to SharePoint on June 5th, 2024 by 4 p.m. September, announcements are posted on the CHAPA website of eligible housing programs to which business firms contribute. November, contributing business firm applications are due to CHAFA November 2024. Uncommitted funds become available to the next highest ranked applicants who can secure business firm commitments. In December, applications for contributing business firms for uncommitted funds are due to CHAFA by December 2024.
Great, thank you, Trayvon. Any questions on that before we turn it over to Seema to go through the SharePoint? All right, Seema.
Good morning, everyone. Now we'll go over how to request an application website. So we use a Microsoft product called SharePoint to get an application started. It's where you'll have the consolidated application and everything related to your application. And today I'll go over like a dummy website. This is what you would see when you request a SharePoint site. So at the top, there's a little blurb about the HTCC, and on the site panel, you have the task list and all of the CONAP and all of that we'll go over today. Next slide. So how to get access? So Colette shared Jaffa website. Right there, there is something called instructions. So you can look at that, and some of it is already mentioned here. So you would send an application to this application request at jaffa.org, mention the round name, uh, application name, company, primary contact, email, phone, and the important point here is mention email addresses of any additional users who would need access to the SharePoint. This is critical. Previously, you could add users yourself. Now you're no longer able to add users. So let us know the email addresses, and we'll take care of that for you. Every application request has to be a separate email. Give us 2-3 days to set up a website. Once it's set up, you'll get a notification. And all SharePoint sites must be requested by 4 p.m. on Friday, May 31st. Next slide. Sharing the SharePoint site. SharePoint allows you to share the site with other folks. You can assign complete tasks, update the same consolidated application. You can upload files as necessary. But again, team members cannot by themselves share site with others. You have to send in a request to application request at jaffa.org. Next. On the SharePoint, on the side panel, you'll see something called a task list, and it pretty much lays down all the tasks. And once all the items are checked off, the application website will lock and your application will be submitted. We get this question quite a lot, that how do I know my application submitted? Once everything is checked off, it will be submitted. Next. So this is what it looks like, the side panel. Right under home is the task list. Once you click all on those checkboxes, your application will be submitted. Next one. So the next on the navigation pane was the consolidated application. So you have a copy of the CONAP built in to the SharePoint. You can even download one from the SharePoint. You can edit, save directly, allowing team members to work on the same file. But note, Microsoft, recently, it's not that recent, it's been about 2 years now, that they don't allow macros on files from the internet. So the workaround is save the CONAP to your PC and then open it from there. And once you're done, then you can upload it back to the SharePoint. It can also be downloaded from Jaffa DOH websites, and you can then upload it to SharePoint. But the important point here is you must use the 2024 version. That's on our website, and that's on the SharePoint portal also. Next. So this is what it looks like, CONAP, and you can download it right from here, and 2024 version. That's the big point here. Next. So the next section there is file uploads. So These sections are aligned with the sections in the consolidated application. And please upload files to relevant section folders. It makes our review process easy. It's easy to find them. And you'll notice we've abbreviated the section names, and we want you to do the same with your file names. Keep them short and relevant. Next, reference library. So this is a section that includes all the templates and forms that you might need for the HTCC round. You can download right from here. Next. All right, next is the help section. You can, type in on the upper left section, or you can click on the links, and then there are some helpful videos also. Next. Submitting the application. All right, that's where we get most questions. Application is due by 4 p.m. on Wednesday, June 5th, 2024. And as it approaches 4, the site can get jammed up, so plan accordingly. At this point, SharePoint will be locked. For further editing, any items that are not completely uploaded by then will be considered deficient. It is recommended to upload documents as they're completed to avoid last-minute, panic. CHAFA will not review any uploads to the SharePoint site until after the application submission date and time. Nothing submitted via email will be considered part of the application unless specifically requested by CHAFA or DOH. And just reiterating, the way to lock it is you mark all the items on the task list as complete, and it will lock and submit your application. Next. All right, now we'll go a little bit over the consolidated application. Most of you have used it. It's a large Excel workbook, and it is the same application for all the various rounds that we have here. It includes templates, forms, and instructions, and each round has some threshold requirements, and that's part of the exhibit checklist. It has links for ease of navigation and reference, and it includes buttons on the exhibit checklist to show only the items pertaining to your funding round. Next. So the way to do that is you start on the exhibit checklist and click on the core items button and then check the appropriate funding round. And what that does is it will hide any of the items that are not relevant for your specific round, and it's only hiding it, so it's not that anything's gone anywhere, it's just hiding. If you've made a mistake, you can again say show all and you'll be able to see everything. There are a lot of ways to put data into the spreadsheet. There are checkboxes, drop downs, blank fields. Next. So there are drop downs, there are tables, there are checkboxes. Okay, so complete the worksheet, print and sign any applicable signature documents, and then you can scan and upload signed document to the SharePoint. Version 2024 must be used, and if something needs to be modified or you need a cell to be unlocked, let us know. Make sure you provide us with the rationale as to why you need something modified, but we'll review it. Next.
Great.
Okay.
Any questions for Seema before we move on? Great, hearing none. I wanted to introduce Stephen Norris, who is also one of our HTCC staff members who reviews quarterly reports and applications, and many of you, among other things for the department in multifamily, but maybe some of you have interacted with him before. So Stephen, you want to go ahead?
Hello. Yeah, I'm going to go through maintaining compliance. So we go to the next slide. Program compliance begins after the credits are awarded. Compliance consists of quarterly report submissions and also site visit inspections that will be between the CHAFA staff and also the sponsor. Quarterly reports are due no later than the 15th of January, April, July, October of each year for the life of the award, which is 3 years, or until the project has closed out. I do recommend having a calendar reminder just so you can maintain the deadlines for each quarterly report. Quarterly reports and all backup documentation must be uploaded to the HTCC Dropbox via the link on the CHAFA website that was explained by Colette earlier in this presentation. Quarterly reports must be accompanied by a disbursement and or accounting summary of the housing program segregated account, any applicable invoices, and also progress reports. Progress photos taken at the properties. The information that is provided must match the submitted quarterlies, so invoices must match the expenditures that are shown, in the bank statements and such. And also, if permits of financing commitments weren't provided during application, they should be provided once they are obtained. Next slide. In accordance with the HTCC guidelines, any changes to the allocation of HTCC funds must be discussed with CHAFA. Their intended uses are not fungible. Also, any material deviation requires CHAFA's written consent, and failure to obtain written consent shall be considered an event of noncompliance. Failure to submit quarterly reports or respond to findings of noncompliance will have a negative impact on all future applications by the sponsor or any affiliated entities. Also, applicants who fail to timely provide 4 quarterly reports or those with housing programs and material noncompliance may be ineligible to apply for funds and will also be classified as programmatic noncompliant. Next slide. Applicants are advised to familiarize themselves with CHAFA's policies, procedures, and guidelines so that they are aware of the penalties for noncompliance. Going briefly into the HTCC closeout. Upon project completion, each applicant is required to complete a project closeout form. In that HTCC website that Colette showed earlier, those provide all the forms and checklists and stuff. So that's a very good resource to review before you submit the closeouts. Applicants should also additionally provide certificate of occupancy, notarized CHAFA certificate of completions, summary of expenditures, and evidence of nonprofit continued compliance, which we track as well. Next slide. Failure to submit final completion documents within 90 days of project completion will result in the ineligibility of the applicant in the HTCC program for a period of 2 consecutive funding rounds. Also, failure to proceed with the housing programs or demonstrate completion within the required time frame, which may result in funds being reclaimed and or ineligibility of the applicant in the HTC program for a period of 2 consecutive funding rounds as well. I'm just kind of going through a couple of tips to kind of help with the application process. The first tip is to cultivate potential relationships. The pool of investors is not deep. So CHAFA maintains a good relationship with Eversource. We recommend you do as well. PG Magnoli is the Eversource contact. So if you ever need to reach out, please feel free to contact Colette or myself, and we can help you with getting into contact with them. So you can always set up a site visit with them as well, just to kind of help that relationship. Number 9, don't wait until the last minute to submit your application. Give yourself the time to address the questions or issues with your submissions, so you're not waiting until the last hour and at risk of not being able to provide complete and accurate. Number 8 is follow the exhibit checklist and read the application carefully to clearly understand what is required. If there is a T on the checklist, it is a threshold requirement. Going to number 7, the next slide. If you are an applicant checking yes that there's an identity of interest between development team members, then you must submit a certification explaining what that relationship is. Number 6 is total expected sources should not include the current HTC request. There is a separate line item for prior rounds of HTCC. Number 5, issues arise when applicants alter, edit, or delete parts of the consolidated application, including formulas. This can cause errors throughout the whole application, so please be cognizant of that as you're completing your application. Also, number 4, avoid having conflicting information like the unit mix on the application tab versus rental income sheet. Just double check your application before submission, making sure everything's accurate and consistent. Number 3, applicants submitting application that is missing threshold items, no matter how minor they may seem, may not move forward within the round due to missing threshold items. So it's very important to just kind of make sure all those threshold items are received and also, accurate as well. Number 2, applicants should read the guidelines and ensure they meet application requirements. And then number 1, the last one, read the instructions in the CONAP carefully. Remember, there is no deficiency period. Double check and triple check all your application submissions to make sure all the required items are included and completed and accurate as well. Also, a couple of extra tips for applicants previously funded. Just maintain program compliance and eligibility to apply. Maintain submitting complete quarterly reports timely, using the proper forms as well. If you as applicant needs to make any changes to their housing program after they've been awarded, you should submit your request as soon as possible. And then keep track of the closeout dates and make sure to submit required closeout materials on time.
Great.
These are the contacts.
All right.
Looks like we do have one hand up.
All right. Great.
All right, that's me. Hi, Colette. It's Julie. How are you?
Hi. Good. How are you?
Good. I have 3 questions. I just want to be clear. This is for Jennifer, actually. So I just want to be clear. The phase 1, if there's no work outside the building envelope, then a phase 1 is not required, regardless of the size of that building and how many units?
Yeah, for HTCC is correct. If you're just doing an interior renovation with no work at all on the outside, regardless of the size, right, for HTCC funding, we are not requiring a phase 1.
Okay, what if there's roof work?
No, that's fine because that includes the building itself, and
Gotcha.
and that would not prompt any soil excavation, any kind of excavation at all
Right.
on the site. So
Okay.
no. Yep.
Okay, great. If zoning approval is not necessary and site plans are not required, are you simply looking for a zoning compliance letter?
For tech, I don't think we're looking for anything. It's totally been removed from the CONAP.
Well, I'm trying to wrap my brain around that.
But go ahead,
Okay.
Colette.
It's your responsibility, but it's not something that we're going to be reviewing.
Okay, very good. And lastly, to Helen's question, Seema, you mentioned that the application is currently ready and it's up on the website, but if we don't have to do the exploded trade payment breakdown, are you anticipating another version to be available, and should we wait before we start using the CONAP?
I don't think we would be able to provide another version. CONAP is used for all the rounds, not just for HTCC. I think how Colette answered might be the best way to move forward. You can fill it out, but CHAFA is not reviewing it.
Gotcha. I've filled out before just like the bottom so it populates so I can feed it to the development budget. Okay, just wanted to be clear.
A good
Great.
suggestion, yeah.
Okay.
And
Thank
we'll
you.
try and get that turned around quickly in a Q&A because I know that you guys are going to start looking at your applications.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else? While you're thinking, if you have any more questions, I mean, I hope everyone realizes that you are more than welcome to reach out to us. If you have any questions, if you're not sure who to contact, you're welcome to contact me directly, and I can make sure that we get the proper member of the CHFA team to help you. If you have questions about your application or a project that you're looking to do, you're welcome to reach out to us. I know we've spoken with many of you in the past. Just make sure that you guys realize that we're here as a resource. Any other questions for the greater group? And you guys are welcome to email questions afterwards. We will maintain a question and answer document. We posted in that same area on the website that we have the PowerPoint slides. So we usually will send an e-blast when that's posted. And if we continue to get questions, we'll update it up to the deadline. So that's kind of how we handle ongoing questions. Jennifer, do you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick clarification because there is a distinction between a hazardous materials review and a phase one. A phase one typically addresses the site. So to Julie's point, asking about the roofing, if the building is an older building and the roofing could contain asbestos, a hazardous materials survey would still be required for that roofing, but a phase one related to contamination of soil and water would not be required. I just wanted to make that clarification because sometimes people think that the phase one automatically includes, asbestos, radon, lead-based paint, and that's not always the case, when you engage your LEP. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you. All right. Well, best of luck. Feel free to reach out if you have questions, and we'll get a Q&A document up on the website, and we'll e-blast that so that you guys know that it's available. And we'll also look to make this info session available too. Just give us time to figure out how to do that. But we'll hope to get that up soon as a resource for any of your colleagues who may not have been able to join us today, or if you want to come back to the recording to check on something that we had discussed. So with that, thank you again for your interest. We are excited to have another round of applications and looking forward to funding more affordable housing developments. So thank you, everyone. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.